that the federal government has no place trying to protect adults from their own behavior. Cigarette smoking, while bad and icky and all that, we're all outraged by cigarette smoking and we're very upset that it occurs. By the way, beer drinking, which everybody does, and the majority of murders are committed by drunk people. But like nobody mentions that because everyone drinks. So it's like, you're a prohibitionist if you're saying anything against alcohol. But anyway, whatever, all against smoking. It's not the government's place to tell you that you can't hurt yourself.
Well, every election cycle, you probably notice, more states legalize marijuana. It could soon be legal nationwide, likely will be. But with drug abuse of all kinds soaring and American youth falling apart, is legalization a good idea? And what exactly do we know about marijuana? David Bienenstock is the author of How to Smoke Pot Properly and co-host of the podcast Great Moments in Weed History. David, thank you very much for coming on. So I guess the first thing I noticed, there was a really interesting piece this week by Malcolm Gladwell in The New Yorker. I'm sure you read it. And it asked, and he's kind of agnostic, I think, about the question of marijuana, but he made the point that we really don't know that much about the health effects of marijuana. Most of the claims made by its proponents are unproven. But the CDC does say that there is a relationship between marijuana use and rising schizophrenia rates and violence. So why should we legalize something that we know causes schizophrenia?
You'll remember that December of 2020 was the deadliest month to date in the COVID pandemic. More than 65,000 Americans had died that month. People were very afraid of the virus then. There was no treatment protocol for it. Vaccines seemed like the only hope. So the meeting was very significant. The CDC's chief medical officer, a person called Kathleen Dooling, unveiled her plan to distribute the vaccines nationally. She began by acknowledging that older Americans indeed faced the greatest risk, as everyone understood. So logically, if you wanted to save as many Americans as possible from dying, you would give preference, the very first shots, to people over 65. That's the obvious policy. It might be the only morally defensible policy. But there was a problem with doing that, she explained. Older Americans were too white. As Dooling put it, quote, racial and ethnic minority groups are underrepresented among adults age 65 and older. And this meant, according to Dooling, they could not be allowed to get the first COVID shots, whether they needed them or not. So instead, Dooling recommended giving priority to a group the government started calling essential workers. Their main qualification was not that they were essential, but they were less white than old people.
No, that's not actually true.
There has never been a death attributed to cannabis. Absolutely,
really, there have been many
deaths. Saying something's not true.
Well, I'm going to. If it is true, as the CDC says, that cannabis use looks like it causes or spurs.
What is a lethal dose of cannabis, Tucker? What is a lethal dose?
If it causes
How much do you have to
schizophrenia,
consume?
hold on. What percentage of people with
Just answer my
schizophrenia?
question.
Right. No, I'm saying you're looking at it wrong. If weed smoking causes schizophrenia, and there's a suggestion that it does, schizophrenia kills lots of people. And so does suicide, and so does violence. And if marijuana use hikes rates of violence, and it seems like there's a lot of evidence that it does, then that kills people. So the question is not do they die from lung cancer, the question is do they die from suicide or violence? And those are real questions, and you don't know the answers to them. So why are you saying it's totally safe when you don't know that that's true?
I did not say it's totally safe. That's a ridiculous standard. Strenuous exercise can lead to a heart attack that's fatal. Right. Drinking too much water can be fatal. I think you need to understand the difference between correlation and causation.
His willingness to end the federal ban on marijuana. Many people think that's great. Former Democratic Congressman Patrick Kennedy feels uneasy about it. He just wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal warning that legalizing marijuana could be bad for kids. Well, it would also set back, he says, the cause of social justice. We spoke to him earlier about this.